December 27th, 1942, Port Moresby, New Guinea. The tropical haze still clung to the air as Second Lieutenant Richard Ira Bong climbed into his P-38 Lightning for his first taste of combat. His hands were steady, his breathing even, yet his thoughts burned with a quiet conviction. The Japanese have ruled these skies long enough. Today, that ends. Through the canopy he spotted them, 40 Japanese aircraft bursting from the clouds, bombers flanked by the feared Mitsubishi A6M Zeros that had dominated the Pacific for a year. 12 American P-38s rose to meet them. The odds were absurd, the danger certain. What the Japanese couldn't know was that among those 12 men flew a farm boy from Wisconsin who would soon become the most feared name in the Pacific skies. A pilot whose precision, fearlessness, and intuition would rewrite the very logic of air combat. Richard Bong had arrived, and Japanese air supremacy would never recover. The first cracks appeared that humid morning over Buna. Bong, flying with Captain Thomas Lynch of the 39th Fighter Squadron, downed 2 enemy fighters, a Zero and a Nakajima Ki-43 Oscar. It was the start of a legend. For his performance, Bong received the Silver Star, though no citation could capture the unease felt by his enemies. Decades later, Japanese records reveal the words of Petty Officer First Class Hiroshi Nakamura. The American twin-engine planes attacked with precision we had not seen before. One pilot moved unlike any we'd faced. He fought with speed, altitude, and control. It disturbed us greatly. The making of America's deadliest fighter ace had begun years earlier in the rolling farmland of Wisconsin. Born September 24, 1920, in Superior to Swedish immigrants Carl and Dora Bong, Richard was the eldest of 9 children. The Bong farm offered little luxury, but it was rich in discipline, faith, and hard work. At 8, he watched mail planes fly over during President Calvin Coolidge's vacation in Superior and decided his destiny. "I knew then I wanted to fly," he later wrote home. He built model airplanes, read aviation magazines, and studied every detail of flight. By high school, Bong's mix of brains and grit set him apart. He graduated 10th in a class of 428. Played sports, sang in the choir, and hunted with precision that would later translate into deadly aim. In 1938, he entered Superior State Teachers College to study engineering, but was quickly drawn into the civilian pilot training program. On his 20th birthday, he soloed in a Piper Cub, his instructors noting his uncanny awareness and instinct. By May 1941, Bong joined the U.S. Army Air Corps Aviation Cadet Program. At Luke Field, Arizona, he trained under Captain Barry Goldwater, later a U.S. Senator, who called him the finest natural pilot I ever met. Another instructor remarked, "There's no way to shake Bong off your tail." He flew slower planes, yet somehow always found the angle to win. On January 9, 1942, barely a month after Pearl Harbor, Richard Bong's journey from farm boy to America's ace of aces truly began. After Pearl Harbor, Second Lieutenant Richard Ira Bong received his pilot's wings and commission. His dream of flying had finally become reality, yet instead of heading straight into battle, his exceptional gunnery scores earned him an instructor post at Luke Field. For months, Bong trained other pilots while the Pacific burned with war. The delay was frustrating, but it honed his discipline. Teaching forced him to explain instincts that came naturally, turning talent into mastery. In May 1942, he was ordered to Hamilton Field, California, for advanced training on the Lockheed P-38 Lightning, a radical twin-engine fighter with its trademark twin-boom tail and central nacelle cockpit. Powered by 2 425-horsepower Allison V1710 engines, the Lightning could climb to 25,000 feet and top 414 mph. Armed with a 20mm cannon and 450 caliber machine guns, all nose-mounted for pinpoint accuracy, it packed terrifying firepower. But it was also demanding, heavy-handled, cold at altitude, and dangerous in unskilled hands. Bong instantly grasped its potential. In the Pacific, where battles stretched across vast ocean distances, range, speed, and climb mattered more than turn rate. At Hamilton, his flying impressed and alarmed his superiors. On June 12, 1942, he buzzed a fellow pilot's home so low that the prop wash scattered debris across the yard, then tore down San Francisco's Market Street at rooftop height, even blowing laundry from clotheslines in Oakland. Furious, General George C. Kenney summoned him personally. "If you didn't want to fly down Market Street, I wouldn't have you in my Air Force," Kenney warned, "but you're not to do it again." Yet behind the reprimand was admiration. We needed kids like this, aggressive, fearless, the kind who'd press the attack when others turned back. When General Douglas MacArthur chose Kenney to lead the 5th Air Force in the South Pacific, the general handpicked 50 of his best Lightning pilots. Bong was among them. By September 1942, the farm boy from Wisconsin was in Australia, about to become the Pacific's deadliest predator. Assigned to the 9th Fighter Squadron, 49th Fighter Group, the Flying Knights, Bong found himself flying obsolete P-40 Warhawks, no match for the agile Japanese Zeros. Rather than waste his skill, Kenney temporarily attached him to the 39th Fighter Squadron, 35th Fighter Group, at Port Moresby, where Captain Thomas Lynch, a rising ace, took him under his wing. Lynch understood the Zero's deadly agility, unmatched at low-altitude turning fights, but fragile and slow in dives. He taught Bong the gospel of survival. Never turn with a Zero, attack from above, strike hard, and climb away. Bong absorbed every word, then refined the method. He calculated deflection angles and lead distances with surgical precision, getting so close that missing was nearly impossible. On December 27, 1942, Bong faced his first true test. 40 Japanese aircraft swept over Buna. 12 P-38s scrambled to intercept. The odds were hopeless, but Bong saw opportunity. Diving from altitude, he lined up on a Zero threatening Lynch, fired a short, devastating burst, and watched it explode in mid-air. 3 more Zeros chased him down through the jungle sky. Bong dove nearly to the treetops, pulling out just 2 feet above the canopy. His pursuers weren't so lucky, too, smashed into the forest. Moments later, he sighted a slow-climbing Val dive bomber and blasted it into a fireball. That day, he claimed 2 confirmed kills and earned the Silver Star, but the real victory was psychological. Japanese pilots reported encountering an American whose skill rivaled their best aces. Commanders dismissed the reports as exaggeration. They weren't. Within 2 weeks, Bong had proved it again. On January 7, 1943, Allied coast watchers spotted a Japanese convoy off New Britain. 48 American fighters launched to intercept. Bong, flying with Lynch, missed the initial rendezvous and ran headlong into the convoy's screen of Nakajima Ki-43 Oscars. The battle raged for hours. Bong downed 1 Oscar after a precise 5-minute duel, waiting patiently, maneuvering vertically, then striking at 50 yards. After refueling, he returned to the fight, damaging 2 more before destroying another with a clean pass. The next day, January 8th, brought the mission that made him an ace. Escorting bombers against 20 Japanese fighters, Bong ignored the numbers and attacked. Amid twisting chaos, he lined up a long 200-yard deflection shot and shredded his target mid-turn, his 5th confirmed victory, earning the Distinguished Flying Cross and the title of Fighter Ace. By April 1943, scarcely 4 months into combat, Richard Bong had 10 kills to his name, and the legend of America's Ace of Aces was only beginning. By mid-1943, Richard Ira Bong had shot down 10 Japanese aircraft, making him a double ace. His name was now known on both sides of the Pacific. Japanese pilots spoke of a mysterious twin-boom fighter flown with uncanny precision. Bong's rise from novice to ace had been fast but deliberate, every sortie a lesson carefully studied. He learned that the P-38's twin engines meant survival. Many pilots limped home on 1 power plant when single-engine planes would have gone down. He'd learned that altitude was life. The man who held the high ground chose the fight. And he learned that patience killed. Waiting for the perfect moment was more deadly than blind aggression. Between missions, Bong became teacher as well as hunter. He drilled new arrivals, frightened inexperienced boys just off transport planes in the art of survival. Respect the zero, but never fear it. Exploit your strengths, speed, firepower, and toughness, and avoid its domain, tight turns, and low-speed duels. He took them aloft to demonstrate, climb above the target, keep the sun behind you, dive hard, fire short bursts, and never linger to turn. When you miss, keep diving, regain altitude, and try again. Never slow down. His direct, hands-on instruction saved lives. Promoted to first lieutenant in April 1943, Bong was already a proven ace, but he wanted mastery, not mere survival. That moment came on July 26, 1943, over Lae, New Guinea. Leading 10 P-38s, he spotted about 20 enemy fighters. The prudent choice was to hold altitude and wait for support. Bong chose attack. In 3 head-on strikes, he tore into the Japanese formation, downing 2 aircraft immediately. As reinforcements arrived, 15 more zeros. The odds swelled to 3-1. Most would have broken off. Bong dove back in. In the furious fight that followed, he destroyed 2 more planes, scoring 4 kills in one mission. His wingmen later wrote that Bong flew with absolute calm and perfect precision, firing only when sure of a hit. 10 Japanese aircraft were lost that day, 4 to Bong, without a single American casualty. For this, he earned the Distinguished Service Cross. The psychological impact was immense. Surviving Zero pilot Lieutenant Kenji, Okamoto described in his diary the American twin-boom ghost who attacks from impossible angles. Orders soon warned Japanese flyers, if you see the lightning with red-tipped wings, disengage at once. By August 1943, Bong had 15 confirmed kills and wore captain's bars. Newspapers hailed him, but he deflected praise. In letters home, he wrote, "I'm just doing my job." The real heroes are the ground crews keeping us in the air. His effectiveness came from analysis, not bravado. After every sortie, he pored over gun camera film, noting errors and adjusting technique. His best kills, he found, came within 100 yards, sometimes 50. 2 seconds of firing was usually enough. He refused reckless chases or glory runs. Living pilots, he reminded others, could fight tomorrow. He never lost a wingman, rare among aces, and shared credit freely. Loyalty made his men fiercely protective of him. In November 1943, General Kenny ordered Bong home for rest after a year of non-stop combat, and to preserve a symbol the public had come to idolize. At a homecoming event at Superior State Teachers College, Bong met Marjorie Vattendahl, a bright, graceful student who quickly captured his heart. When he returned to the Pacific in January 1944, his Lightning bore her photograph on the nose and the name Marge in her honor. Tasteful and proud, not risque. The red-tipped wings remained. Japanese pilots learned to dread them. Fate intervened that March. Lieutenant Thomas Malone flew Marge on a weather recon mission when an engine failed over Papua New Guinea. He bailed out safely, but the famed aircraft crashed in a ravine. The plane was lost, but Bong's legend was only growing, swallowed by the jungle that would conceal her remains for nearly 80 years. Bong mourned the loss of his beloved Marge, but he kept flying, transferring her photograph and his trademark red markings onto every new P-38 he piloted. By April 1944, his score had soared to 27 confirmed victories, surpassing Captain Eddie Rickenbacker's World War I record of 26. Rickenbacker himself sent a handwritten letter of praise. "You have done what I once hoped another American pilot would. Become the best of the best. Your courage and skill honor our Air Force and our nation." The news spread like wildfire. Headlines proclaimed him America's greatest fighter ace. Life magazine featured him in a photo spread. Radio shows aired interviews. Newsreel cameras captured his every public appearance. Recognizing his immense morale value, the War Department promoted him to Major and sent him on a 15-state war bond tour. For 2 months, Bong crisscrossed the country, speaking at training bases, addressing vast crowds and inspiring millions. He toured aircraft factories, telling workers that every rivet they installed kept pilots alive. He visited hospitals, quietly offering words of encouragement to wounded veterans. Mayors handed him keys to their cities. Children waved flags. He smiled politely, but in letters to Marge, he confessed his discomfort. "I don't belong on a stage. I belong in a cockpit. My friends are still fighting while I talk." His humility was genuine. To him, he was just another pilot doing his duty. Yet the effect was enormous. Wherever Bong appeared, bond sales spiked, enlistments surged, and production lines quickened. Against his will, the quiet farm boy had become a national symbol of courage and endurance. General George C. Kenney understood the power of that symbol and the risk behind it. Losing Bong would shatter morale. When the ace returned to the Pacific in September 1944, Kenney reassigned him to 5th Air Force Headquarters as a gunnery instructor. Officially, Bong could fly but was not to seek combat. Unofficially, the clever major noted the loophole. If combat found him, he could respond. And respond he did. Operating from Tacloban during the Philippines campaign, he seemed to appear wherever enemy aircraft threatened. 28 kills became 30, then 35. The skies over Leyte and Luzon were crowded with desperate Japanese resistance and suicidal kamikaze raids, fertile ground for Bong's precision marksmanship. His gun camera films, verified by multiple witnesses, revealed the same formula: short 2-second bursts, point-blank range, immediate escape. No wild firing, no wasted rounds, only calculated destruction. As his tally neared 40, speculation grew about when he would finally be grounded. Kenney wanted him to secure a symbolic record, but live to enjoy it. The compromise: gradually reduce his sorties while giving him chances to reach the fabled number. On December 12, 1944, at Tacloban Airfield, General Douglas MacArthur personally awarded Major Bong the Medal of Honor. MacArthur, eschewing his prepared speech, spoke with rare sincerity. "Major Richard Ira Bong, who has ruled the air from New Guinea to the Philippines, I now welcome you among the bravest of the brave, the wearers of the Medal of Honor of the United States." Hundreds of servicemen stood at attention in the tropical heat as cameras rolled. Bong, modest as ever, shifted uneasily while the medal was pinned to his chest. The citation listed his 40 aerial victories, leadership and gallantry, but could not capture the full legacy. He had not merely destroyed enemy planes. He had reshaped U.S. fighter tactics and mentored a generation of airmen. 5 days later, on December 17, 1944, he achieved his 40th and final confirmed kill over the Philippines. One clean 3-second burst that obliterated an enemy fighter before it could react. Intelligence officers confirmed the kill from his gun camera footage. The record stood unmatched. Both MacArthur and Kenney agreed it was time to bring him home. Losing him now would be unthinkable. In January 1945, Major Richard Bong returned to the United States as its most celebrated airman. The nation greeted him as a hero. Newspapers printed his story daily, radio programs replayed his interviews, and theaters showed the Medal of Honor ceremony to cheering crowds. But the public's greatest fascination was with Marge, the girl behind the photograph. On February 10, 1945, Richard Bong married Marjorie Vattendahl in Superior, Wisconsin. The event made front-page news nationwide. Hundreds attended. Thousands more sent telegrams. The ceremony at Concordia Lutheran Church was simple, heartfelt, and steeped in small-town warmth. Marge wore a classic white gown. Dick stood proudly in his Army Air Forces uniform, his Medal of Honor gleaming. Fellow pilots served as groomsmen. The church overflowed with family, townspeople, and reporters eager to capture every moment. For Bong, after 3 relentless years of war, the wedding represented peace, stability, and the promise of life beyond the cockpit. In his vows, he spoke softly of love, faith, and the home he had finally earned. Witnessed by hundreds, he promised Marge a peaceful life, far removed from the dangers he had endured. He spoke softly of building a home, starting a family, and pursuing a future in aviation away from the front lines. For a man who had faced death daily for 3 years, these dreams were simple yet profound. The wedding reception overflowed with laughter and joy. Friends toasted the newlyweds. Stories of Bong's daring exploits were retold with pride, and for a few brief hours, the war seemed distant. Bong danced with his new bride, smiled for cameras, and allowed himself to believe that his battles were finally over. Their honeymoon took them to California, where Bong had accepted a position as a test pilot for Lockheed Aircraft Corporation. His wartime experience made him an ideal candidate to evaluate the next generation of American fighters, most notably the Lockheed P-80 Shooting Star, America's first operational jet fighter. It seemed a perfect fit, challenging, meaningful, yet safe. Bong could continue serving aviation's progress while building a life with Marge. But jet flight in 1945 was still perilous. The technology was revolutionary, the speeds unprecedented, but reliability lagged behind ambition. Jet engines were temperamental. Control systems were experimental. Safety checklists were being invented through trial and error. Each flight was a step into the unknown. On the morning of August 6, 1945, Major Bong arrived at Lockheed's Burbank Field for what was scheduled as a routine acceptance flight of P-80 tail number 4485048. He had logged just over 4 hours in the aircraft, still in the early stages of mastering its quirks. The Shooting Star was sleek and powerful, capable of 594 mph, faster than any piston fighter ever built, but its systems were still fragile. The pre-flight inspection revealed nothing abnormal. At 2:30 p.m., Bong started the single Allison J-33 turbojet. The whine was unlike the roar of his beloved P-38s. After clearance from the tower, he taxied onto runway 15 and began his takeoff roll. Witnesses later recalled how smoothly the jet lifted into the hot California sky. But seconds later, black smoke erupted from the engine. The P-80 rolled right, steadied, then its canopy suddenly tore free. Bong had begun ejection procedures. Moments later, the engine failed completely and the jet pitched nose down. At barely 200 feet, Bong ejected, but there was no time for his parachute to fully open. He struck the ground at high speed near the intersection of Oxnard Street and Satsuma Avenue in Burbank. The aircraft exploded seconds later in a ball of flame. Emergency crews reached the scene within minutes, but Bong had been killed instantly. The subsequent investigation determined that the primary fuel pump had malfunctioned during takeoff. A secondary pump, activated by a switch on the cockpit's left console, could have restored power, but investigators could not confirm whether Bong had time to reach it amid the chaos. Fellow test pilot Captain Ray Crawford later recalled Bong mentioning a similar pump issue on a prior flight that he had corrected in time. This time, fate gave no second chance. On August 7, 1945, newspapers across the nation reported Bong's death, tragically positioned beside headlines announcing the atomic bombing of Hiroshima. The irony was devastating. America's greatest fighter ace, who had survived more than 200 missions and countless dogfights against Japan, died testing a U.S. jet on the same day that marked the beginning of Japan's end. Marge Bong was inconsolable. Married less than 6 months, she spoke years later with undiminished sorrow. Dick survived everything the Japanese could throw at him. He came home to me. We were going to start our life, and then in a moment he was gone. Chuck Yeager, who would later break the sound barrier, wrote in his memoirs that Bong's death shook the test pilot community deeply. They had grown used to loss, but this one felt different. Bong was supposed to make it, Yeager wrote. He'd earned his survival. Bong's funeral in Poplar, Wisconsin drew thousands. A military honor guard stood vigil as General Kenny attended, in silent grief. Marge followed the flag-draped casket, her composure masking unbearable pain. The small farming community that had sent its proud son to war received him home for the final time, but not in the way they had hoped. Major Richard Ira Bong was just 24 years old. His legacy extended far beyond his record of 40 aerial victories. The tactics he refined, energy management, boom and zoom attacks, use of altitude and surprise, became cornerstones of American air combat doctrine. Japanese ace Saburo Sakai later admitted that the P-38 destroyed the morale of the Zero pilot, calling it one of the most deadly of all enemy planes. Bong's influence shaped generations of aviators. His decorations told the story of unmatched valor: the Medal of Honor, the Distinguished Service Cross, 2 Silver Stars, 7 Distinguished Flying Crosses, and 15 Air Medals, 27 honors in all. Yet those who knew him best said his favorite words never changed: "We're just doing our job." In the years that followed, tributes arose across Wisconsin. The airport in Superior was renamed Richard Bong Airport. The Richard Bong Veterans Historical Center opened nearby, displaying his uniforms, medals, and letters. A P-38 Lightning stands proudly outside as a permanent reminder of the young man who ruled the skies. Across the Midwest, schools, streets, and parks bear his name, a legacy not of war's destruction but of courage, humility, and excellence that transcended it. Bridges, airports, and buildings across the United States now bear his name. In 1986, 41 years after his death, Major Richard Ira Bong was posthumously inducted into the National Aviation Hall of Fame. The ceremony reunited surviving members of his old squadron, men now gray-haired but still carrying the memories of their youth in the skies over the Pacific. Colonel Gerald Johnson, who had flown beside Bong in the 49th Fighter Group, delivered the tribute. "Dick Bong was the finest pilot I ever knew, but that's not why we honor him. We remember him because he made everyone around him better. He taught us how to survive. He showed us that discipline outlasts aggression. He proved that courage backed by preparation can defeat any odds. We were privileged to fly with him." In May 2024, history finally closed one of its longest open chapters. On May 16th, a joint expedition by the Richard Bong Veterans Historical Center and Pacific Rex discovered the wreckage of Bong's P-38 Marge deep in a ravine in Papua New Guinea's Madang province. 2 engines, their red-painted propeller spinners still faintly visible beneath the soil, were recovered. Justin Talon, director of Pacific Rex, called the moment the end of an 80-year mystery. Bong's 99-year-old sister, Jerry Fialco, expressed both sorrow and relief. "After all these years, my brother has finally come home." The numbers that defined Bong's career remain staggering: 40 confirmed aerial victories, over 200 combat missions, more than 500 hours of battleflight time, and not a single wingman lost under his command. These statistics make him not only America's highest-scoring ace, but one of the most efficient combat pilots in aviation history. Thomas McGuire, his friend, rival, and runner-up with 38 kills, summed it up best. Dick wasn't flashy. He didn't take wild chances. He just did everything right. He calculated, closed, fired once, and ended it. He treated air combat like mathematics, precision in motion. 79 years after his death, Bong's record of 40 victories remains unmatched by any American pilot. It's not for lack of skill or opportunity. American flyers in Korea, Vietnam, the Gulf War, and beyond fought bravely. But jet warfare changed everything. Dogfights became brief, impersonal duels. Missiles replaced guns. Air superiority came through speed, sensors, and networks, not close-in combat. The age of the ace had ended, leaving Bong's record untouched, a monument to a vanished era when courage and calculation met face-to-face in the clouds. For Marge Bong, who later remarried and became Marge Ducker, Dick remained the defining memory of her life. She devoted her years to honoring his legacy, working tirelessly to establish the Richard Bong Veterans Historical Center and promote education about World War II aviation. In her later writings, she reflected, World War II was a time of shared purpose. Ordinary people rose to extraordinary courage. Dick always said, "We're just doing our job." With the Heritage Center, we continue that job, keeping alive the stories of all who served. Richard Ira Bong flew his final combat mission on December 17, 1944, and died testing an experimental jet on August 6, 1945, the same day the atomic age began. He lived only 24 years, was married for less than 6 months, and saw combat for under 3. Yet in that short span, he transformed fighter tactics, mentored generations, and became a symbol of calm mastery in chaos. His 40 victories were remarkable, his legacy far greater. He proved that intellect and discipline could triumph over recklessness, that machines meant little without mastery, and that true heroism lay in quiet excellence. The Japanese feared him, and rightly so. He was the man who ruled the skies from New Guinea to the Philippines. The ace of aces, America's deadliest fighter pilot,